In a hypothetical scenario where we become very close friends, where we collaborate, where we're in each other's discords, where we discuss things all the time, and it is publicly known that we are associates, what would happen if that person did something that I personally did not agree with in terms of their content or their collaboration partners or who they in some cases perhaps who they even chose to promote within their own community? Like how would I deal with that? Would I be able to go to that person and be honest with them? Are they the kind of person that I could be honest with? Do I see myself being able to have a rational, private conversation with this other streamer where we can work out our differences peacefully? Or is this person likely to be a source of conflict that I have no choice but to either back away from or take a major hit to my reputation from?
I am so glad that you brought up the whole idea of approaching them privately to sort it out, because something that I've observed way too often, and it frustrates me to no end when I see this, but something that seems to be alarmingly common within EN indie VTubing on the smaller side is that people will be extraordinarily trigger happy when it comes to doing public callouts to resolve what should have just been private conversations or private disputes. And the fact that the knee-jerk response for some creators, and I have talked about some of these in recent streams, but the fact that the knee-jerk response seems to be to go onto Twitter and to complain about something, while at the same time having their existing screenshotable evidence in private conversations that would outright contradict, if not severely undermine, what said call-out post contains.
Yes, the old edited DMs.
The lack of foresight on that being a major decision is just something that, and again, this is probably a result of me spurging out, especially because of my background. But yeah, just for any small creator, you may often receive advice. I know from the conflict that we saw, well, conflict is probably a strong word for it, but from earlier on this year when, and I think you would know about this as well, Proctor, the small thing that happened with Camila posting a 69k follower announcement or celebration, and then people bringing up the fact that she had previously, when she was a much smaller streamer, way before in her career, tried to start shit with Shondo over the fact that Shondo was a lolly VTuber.
Yes, the throwing stones in glass houses problem, basically.
Yes. Camila said in her statement in response to that backlash and as part of her apology that she had been encouraged by a larger creator to create drama as a form of content. If you are a small creator, I urge you, please do not ever view starting personal drama with another streamer as a viable source of content, because that is the equivalent to burying a landmine in your own backyard for yourself to stumble upon in the future in case you actually do end up accruing any sort of success. Drama, if you have to manufacture it personally, is not content. It's just drama. Drama is definitely a viable source of content. Entire channels revolve around it in this space, just like in any other. But would you agree that drama is only a viable source of content when you're not the one manufacturing it?
That's a fairly deep question, honestly, I'd say. I would say that there's a different context to it that's worth considering. And while you've been talking, I've kind of been thinking about myself, and it's interesting because your wording actually helps coalesce an idea in my mind that has been preying on my thoughts for quite some time, in that over the last year or two, there have been several waves of drama where somebody has made a very loud emotional appeal on a big platform like Twitter. And as a result, they have had a tremendous wave of support. However, what's happened later on is that after that initial wave of tremendous support has died off, there have been more analytical figures who have moved in and have started to compile receipts, who have started to look through the information at hand and critique and commentate and put forth their own observations and analyses of what actually happened. And I would say that when you are dealing with anything related to drama, there are two kinds of people that you can either appeal to or have stand against you. on the one hand, you have those that respond to emotional appeals, the kind that read a weepy Twitter post about some terrible event that happened to you, and their immediate response is, "That's dreadful, that's awful, this should never be allowed to happen. I stand with you completely. My heart and soul is bleeding along with yours right now." And that can be very beneficial. It is objectively beneficial in some cases to appeal to those kinds of people because, it will get you views, it will get you attention, etc. and so on. But after that, you move over to the more analytical kind of people. And the thing about the analytical kind of people is that they tend to be everywhere. And when they have formulated their opinion based on an analysis of the facts or the receipts, then they are going to propagate that opinion as far as they can and as wide as they can. And you will quickly discover that while you may have the public's emotional support, in the background, the people that matter will be talking about you, and they are going to remember what you said, and they are going to bring it back up every time that you continue to use the same tactic. And so it's a case of it's like short-term gains versus long-term gains, I think is an easy way to sum it up. The emotional appeals are short-term gains. The long-term gains come from being honest and being analytical and providing receipts.
I mean, that leads in pretty well to the second thing that I was going to... that I think you brought up in one of our prior conversations about this, but yeah. If you are going to come out with something major, any sort of allegation, any sort of, any sort of allegation about any wrongdoing that has been done or made against you, please make sure to cover your own ass, document everything, archive as much as possible, and provide that to the audience that you are going to be appealing to. People in chat are asking, isn't that why you have wranglers or managers? And God, that's a depressing way of living life.
It is a depressing way, but I mean, again, you asked me to be honest.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of depressed people in VTubing, unfortunately. I mean, just leaving alone the fact that VTubers tend to be the types to tend towards depression to begin with.
For sure. And I mean, if you are coming into this industry with the intention of alleviating your feelings of depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, I'm not going to say that it's impossible for you to do that, but I don't think anyone would argue when I say that relying on this space, this industry for that kind of aid is extraordinary. That is a very fragile thing to rely on this industry for. It is a very tenuous supplier of any sort of affirmation or any sort of help. What you were just talking about with regards to the fact that you have to keep in mind all of the different possible audiences that are going to end up seeing what you allege, end up seeing what you say. It actually touches on two of the prior things that I've talked about many, many times on my previous streams. One being, the whole, again, people who've been watching me for a while will know exactly what I mean when I say the super public, right? This concept of an audience that far outstrips the immediate one that gets to see your message. And the fact that when you post something online, you are not talking to an audience, you are essentially slapping something onto a board or a medium, and it's going to stay there long after you are gone. So
it's the public square effect.
Yeah, exactly. And when you brought up the whole idea of needing to provide complete receipts, or at least not trying to present everything in a one-sided fashion, or trying your best not to present something in a way that looks one-sided, it kind of struck me, and I've been trying to think about how to word this for a while as well, but one of the things that I would always advise for creators when they're trying to come out with a public statement about something they feel very personal, something very personal to them, or something where it will involve some kind of request for their audience to take sides in a conflict that they are involved in. Please remember that the overwhelming majority of the people who will see what you write, what you say, are going to be complete and utter strangers. And when you're communicating with complete and utter strangers, you never want to put yourself into a position where the only thing that would act persuasive in what you say is your character. You never want to rely on strangers to make a character judgment on who you are like as a person to believe what you are saying. If you don't provide context, the public will force their own version of events onto you. And, well, you can't really blame them. They are strangers on the internet. As a result, yeah, if you are going to come out with something serious, especially something that has the potential to damage another creator or an organization ones that are going to have their own audience that are emotionally invested in them, it is always going to be in your best interests to posit as objective an argument as possible.
Yes.
In order to get your side of the story out there. And too often what I see is that you'll have people who treat, well, and again, this is going to spiral into me spewing vitriol about Twitter as a platform. But I'm sure you can attest to this as well, how unfortunately Twitter has sort of taken over, it's positioned itself among a lot of creators as a substitute for a therapist or a friend.
Oh, God.
Or a personal journal, and it never works out well because very frequently
I think I can sum that up.
Yeah.
I think I can sum it up as saying that it's taken the place in a lot of people's lives that the validation of friends would normally occupy. People who don't have friends use Twitter to gain the kind of validation that they would get at the bar or over the dinner table.
Yeah, I'd say that's completely accurate because that's exactly how I see people using it. It's just, they just take all of their pent up emotion and frustration and they vent it out over Twitter and to achieve some sort of catharsis. And I mean, sometimes that'll work out well. Hopefully, if you're, assuming your tweet either doesn't get any attention or only attracts attention from your core audience. But the whole point of Twitter, the whole way that it's designed from the ground up, is to expose what you're saying to an audience that is not already familiar with you. So you're essentially just throwing the die every time you do that on whether what you say will attract an audience you want nothing to do with. And if people could move away from using Twitter in that manner, I'm sure, well, I mean, this is a pretty utopic assumption.
Yeah,
but...
sorry for cutting in again, but Rand.ms just said, write that on your diary book. And just from a personal perspective, in terms of practical advice, I would say that being able to just write something down can be very cathartic, and putting your thoughts down on paper, or rather in text on like a Google Doc or something. I'm not talking about a Google Doc you intend to publish. I mean just writing things down and then having a good night's sleep and coming back to it the next day and looking at it from a fresh perspective and going, does this sound like the ramblings of a crazy person? Is a very, very good idea, because it will prevent you from speaking out about things in a way that is permanent, that you will never be able to take back, but which will have long-term consequences.
For sure. And I mean, the first Trump assassination was, well...
Oh, God.
The first Trump assassination attempt, I should say, yeah. This is something that I talked about at the time.
I remember
as well.
those tweets.
Yeah.
Pepperidge Farm remembers
I'm sure
too.
many of us do. But yeah, if you're an indie, and this applies if you're small and you have an audience that a community that you do feel connected to, that you are willing to feel proud of. But especially if you are on the larger side, if you happen to be watching the stream for whatever reason, your audience loves you. I guarantee that if your audience didn't hear your thoughts, or that specific thought that you were about to post in a tweet for 3 more hours after you had it, it's not going to become any less relevant to them. So if you just keep something in the drafts for a little bit, if you keep something in the drafts for a little bit, it doesn't become any less important. But I guarantee that in those, let's say, 1.5 or 3 or 6 or 12 hours that you keep it there, I guarantee that you will be in a better state of mind to evaluate whether that is something that you actually want to be associated with you and your brand image or not. If you are not prepared to have your words torn apart, then you will probably, again, it's always a good idea to make sure that what you put out there, especially onto a platform like Twitter, is something you would be comfortable being associated with in the future, as well as in the immediate present, after you've received the serotonin boost from seeing 50 strangers affirm your emotion.
Also, I would like to push back just very gently on one point that you made about the idea of something being relevant 3 hours after you originally intended to post it. I would say that there are some cases where the timing is very important, that you need, especially if you're in the unfortunate position of being in competition with somebody else that you know is going to make their own move at some point, which is tragically something that I know some VTubers have been in the position to endure. But I think that in that case, that's where planning comes in. You need to be prepared. You need to, I would say a good way to do this is to, as much as possible, have an idea in your head about what you want to say about certain topics you think will become relevant in future. And so that when the time comes, if the time comes, to talk about them in the moment, you won't simply be going straight off the cuff, in the heat of the instant, making things up as you go along. That's when rats start, and that's when you say too many words and, well, braid your own noose.
But Proctor, see, you just described the job of having a PR agent.